Okay, today we're going to talk about finding the discriminant of a quadratic equation and then finding the nature of the roots. Please make sure that you take out a piece of paper if you chose not to print out these notes. So to find the nature of the roots, which is called the discriminant, we're going to make sure the equation is in standard form. ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. Off to the side, we're going to list your a, your b, and your c, and then plug those values into the equation b squared minus 4ac. We're going to look at the chart on the next slide. You need to memorize it to find the nature of the roots. So this here is called the discriminant, and that number is going to help us figure out the nature of the roots. So if you're asked to say what the nature of the roots is, first, if you get a negative answer, the roots are imaginary. If it's 0, then the roots are real, rational, and equal. If it's a perfect square, the roots are real, rational, and unequal. If it's not a perfect square, the roots are real, irrational, and unequal. If you didn't print out the notes, you might want to hit pause for a moment and copy this down. So now here, if we look at the first example, first thing, make sure the equation is in standard form. Off to the side, we're going to list A, B, and C. Now we're going to plug them into the formula to find the discriminant. B squared minus 4AC. That's 3 squared minus 4, 1, and 2. That's 9 minus 8, which is 1. So now, you should have said to yourself, this looks a little familiar. That's from the quadratic formula. So now in your head, think, what happens when I take the square root of 1? It's 1. So because it's positive, it's real. Because it's a perfect square, it's rational. And because it is a number, it's unequal. So here, this is the discriminant. And these terms here are called the nature of the roots. And it's just what kind of answers you get. Let's look at the second example. Again, it is equal to 0. So first, we're off to the side. We're going to list our A, our B, and our C. We're going to write down the formula, b squared minus 4ac. So we have negative 1 squared minus 4, 3, 1. This becomes 1 minus 12, which is negative 11. That is called my discriminant. Now, in my head, I'm going to think, what happens if I take the square root of negative 11? The negative means I have an I. The I stands for imaginary. So the nature of the roots, or what kind of roots they are, they're imaginary roots. And again, this is the nature of the roots. So if it asks for the discriminant, that's a number. If it asks for the nature of the roots, that's one of your 4 choices from like the second slide. Next one. Again, it is equal to 0, so off to the side, I'm going to list my A, my B, and my C. A is 1. B is 0, because technically it's like plus 0x in that equation. And my C is negative 16. So if I go back to my formula, b squared minus 4ac, I get 0 squared minus 4, 1, negative 16. So I get 64. 64, again, is the discriminant. Now, in my head, I'm not writing this down. What happens if I take the square root of 64? I get 8. Since it's not negative, it's real. Since it's a perfect square, it's rational. And because it's not equal to 0, it's unequal. That is the nature of the roots. Next example. Again, it's equal to 0, so the first thing I'm going to do is list my A, my B, and my C. Once again, if there's no x term, there is no b value. B is 0. If I write my formula, I get 0 squared minus 4, 1, 9. If I type that into the calculator, I get negative 36. This here is the discriminant. In my head, what happens if I take the square root of negative 36? Well, that means an I. So that means the nature of the roots is that they are imaginary. Next example, first thing, it's not equal to 0. So I'm going to move these two terms to the other side so that my equation is in standard form. I'm going to list off to the side my A, my B, and my C. We're going to write down the formula. If you want to, you can type this in the calculator. 2 squared is 4 minus 8 is negative 4. That's your discriminant. Now in my head, I'm going to say, what's the square root of negative 4? That tells me there's an I. So that means that the nature of the roots is imaginary. Again, please make sure that if you have any questions, you write them down and you either ask me next time you see me in class or you email me.